What happens when the last line of defense is a line of typewriters? What happens when the only soldiers left to stop an elite German tank battalion are cooks, clerks, and mechanics who had never fired a shot in anger? In the frozen Ardennes forest, on December 17, 1944, approximately 100 support troops from the 99th Infantry Division found themselves holding a critical hill, with no training, no anti-tank weapons, and no hope. Before them rolled the armored spearhead of the 6th Panzer Army. Behind them lay the entire northern shoulder of the Allied line. Pause. This is the story of how American office clerks stopped a German armored division through sheer desperation and courage against impossible odds. By mid-December 1944, the Ardennes sector was supposed to be a quiet sector. The 99th Infantry Division had arrived in Belgium. Just 35 days earlier, green, untested and strung, thin across a 22-mile front that should have been held by an entire corps. These were not the elite paratroopers of the 101st or the battle-hardened. Veterans of the Big Red, these were replacements. Draftees who had shipped out directly from training camps, many without ever handling a bazooka or throwing a live grenade. Among them were the support personnel, the clerks from division headquarters, the cooks from the field kitchens, the truck drivers from the quartermaster company. Major General Walter Lauer, commanding the 99th, had positioned his 3 infantry regiments, the 393rd, 4th, and 395th, along the forward ridges. But behind them, strung out along the roads leading to the vital high ground of Elsenborn Ridge, were the support troops. They manned roadblocks, supply depots, and communication posts. They were not expected to fight. They were expected to type, to cook, to drive. Pause. Hitler had other plans. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, the quiet Ardennes erupted. 2,000 German guns opened fire along an 85-mile front. The largest German offensive in the West had begun. The 99th's forward positions were shattered. The 394th Infantry Regiment took the brunt of the assault from the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division and the 12th Volksgrenadier Division. Communications were cut. Units were surrounded. But in those first desperate hours, the green American infantrymen fought with a ferocity that stunned their attackers. By nightfall on December 16th, the situation was critical. The Germans had punched through the 394th's lines near Losheimer Graben. Through that gap, the 1st SS Panzer Division, Hitler's own bodyguard regiment, began, pouring armored columns toward the west. Their objective: seize the road network behind Elsenborn Ridge, drive to the Meuse River, and then race for Antwerp. But to reach those roads, they first had to pass through a series of tiny Belgian villages, and the support troops of the 99th Division who had been rushed forward to block them. December 17th dawned cold and foggy. The weather grounded all Allied aircraft. The Germans had complete freedom of movement on the ground. Pause. Near the village of Büllingen, approximately 100 support personnel, clerks from the 99th, Division headquarters, military policemen, cooks, and mechanics were ordered to take up positions on a low ridge, overlooking the main approach road. They had rifles. They had a few bazookas that most had never fired. They had no heavy weapons, no anti-tank guns, no artillery observers, and they could hear the rumble of tank engines growing louder by the minute. At approximately 1100 hours on December 17th, the fog lifted just enough to reveal what was coming. Not infantry, not reconnaissance vehicles, tanks, Panthers, at least a dozen of them, advancing in column with armored half-tracks full of SS Panzer Grenadiers. These clerks, these typists and truck drivers were looking at the spearhead of Kampfgruppe Piper, the most dangerous armored formation in the German army. Behind those tanks were veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had fought for years and killed thousands. The clerks had no chance. They knew it. Every man on that ridge knew it. Pause. One of them, a young corporal from the 324th Engineer Battalion who had been assigned to guard a supply dump, later wrote, "We just looked at each other. Nobody said anything. We knew we were going to die." But they did not run. When the first Panther tank clanked within range, a sergeant from the quartermaster company, a man who had never fired a bazooka in training, shouldered the tube, aimed at the tank's flank, and pulled the trigger. The rocket streaked across 200 yards of frozen field and struck the Panther just behind the turret. Black smoke erupted from the engine compartment. The tank lurched to a stop. Pause. For a moment, everything stopped. The German column halted. The SS Panzergrenadiers stared in disbelief. An American clerk had just knocked out a Panther. Then all hell broke loose. The Germans dismounted and attacked the ridge line. Machine gun fire swept the American positions. Mortar rounds began falling. But the clerks, these untrained, terrified clerks, dug in and fired back. They fired their M1 Garands until the clips ran dry. They threw grenades down the slope. When the bazooka teams ran out of rockets, they crawled forward under fire to retrieve ammunition from the wounded. For 3 hours, approximately 100 support troops held that ridge. They knocked out 2 more German half-tracks with bazooka fire. They forced the SS Panzergrenadiers to deploy and fight instead of advancing. They bought time, and time was everything. Because while those clerks fought and died on that nameless ridge, General Walter Robertson of the 2nd Infantry Division was moving, his veteran regiments into position behind them. The 9th Infantry Division was rushing forward. The artillery was registering its guns on Elsenborn Ridge. By nightfall on December 17th, what had been a gap in the American lines was now a solid wall of steel and determination. The clerks had done what no one expected. They had delayed the German timetable by half a day. In the Ardennes, half a day was the difference between defeat and survival. The 1st SS Panzer Division never broke through. Kampfgruppe Piper ran out of fuel and was destroyed near La Glaise. The northern shoulder of the Bulge held. Of the approximately 100 clerks who took that hill, fewer than 40 walked away unwounded. Many of those who fell received no medals. Their records simply listed them as KIA, with their occupations still noted as clerk or cook. But historian Stephen Ambrose later wrote, "The holding of Elsenborn Ridge by the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions, the latter often fighting, in small units out of touch with higher command against attackers who outnumbered them 5-1, was the outstanding achievement of the Battle of the Bulge. And on that ridge, on December 17, 1944, 100 clerks proved that courage is not a matter of training. It is a matter of the human heart. When the clerks of the 99th Infantry Division took that hill, they had no expectation of victory. They had no hope of survival. They had only a ridge, a handful of rifles, and the knowledge that behind them were their friends, their comrades, and their country.